Hello and welcome to the very first episode of God-Sized Stories. We all love a good story. That is why I digest them in so many different mediums. Books, movies, television, video games, or for some like me, professional wrestling. Stories draw us in, and during the best of them, we sit at the edge of our seat. Through stories, we can learn lessons, feel emotion, and make bonds with other people. Think about all the best movies you've ever seen. Can you picture the people who saw them with you? I think of laughing non-stop with my friend Kyle during Spaceballs. And I remember crying multiple times with my wife during Toy Story 3. We humans are relational beings, and God designed us to connect together through stories. He built us to feel emotions through stories, and He programmed us to learn lessons through stories. One of the most beautiful things is that God has given us all stories to tell. Stories with extreme value. Not only stories of superheroes, spaceships, and princesses saving a kingdom, but stories about real-life events and powerful transformations He has done in our lives. He saves us, builds us up, rescues us from danger, strengthens our marriages, and so many countless things. These are God-sized stories. I believe that everyone has a unique story, so tell it. That is what this podcast is all about. I want to record a plethora and variety of stories. I want to provide the opportunity for all people to share their God-sized stories. All ages, backgrounds, nationalities. I want to give opportunities for listeners to laugh, cry, be inspired and amazed. Every one of you has a story, and it is exciting. You may be sitting there thinking that your story is basic and not interesting. We haven't heard it yet, but I can guarantee that your story is invigorating. You have been a believer since you were 4? Amen. You are a stay-at-home mom? Amen. God used you to bring salvation to your spouse? Amen. God rescued you from a life of addiction? Amen. God uses every story in our life, and they are enthralling because it brings glory to Him, and I believe we can all say amen to that. For this very first episode, we will begin with one of my stories. There's dozens of stories I could choose, but for the first episode, I think I will begin with the short version of how God saved me. I was born in a small town in the Midwest and grew up the classic all-American childhood. I had wonderful, salt-of-the-earth parents. My parents have shaped me in many ways and provided me with a strong work ethic, a respect for others, and taught me how to be a good person. The one thing I didn't learn about was God. They claimed to believe, but the God they believed in came from an agnostic theism, meaning they may have said that the God of the Bible was real, but that there were many paths to it. They raised my sisters and me on a belief of moral karma, teaching us that if we do more good than bad, then we will end up in heaven. We were also entrusted with a belief of you can do it yourself by your own willpower. You know the type of person. The person that always pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps. On one hand, this is a great ideal. Our country was built by men and women with a can-do, no one can stop me kind of attitude. On the other hand, this can instill a person with a prideful, selfish heart because they believe that they have earned everything good that has ever happened to them. It also supplies an insecurity and fear of failure because when things go wrong, it means you did something to mess it all up. Those were some of the many, many thoughts in my brain throughout my childhood and teen years. Because of those thoughts, I became a selfish, egomaniacal jerk, especially towards my sisters. I was a terrible brother. On top of it all, I was the golden child. I was like Raymond from Everybody Loves Raymond, or the innkeeper's daughter from Les Mis. I could do no wrong and received all the praise. In my mind, this was all totally fine, because I earned it by being a good kid. My life became only about things that made me happy. As a teenager, that meant spending all my time and money on garbage, bad movies, and endless video games. Eventually, those things could no longer make me happy. In fact, practically nothing made me happy. This caused me to panic. I didn't know what to do because all I knew was there must be something wrong with me. I should be able to make myself be happy. I lived in that mind space for a while, and it made me hate myself. Then, one weekend, a lifelong friend, Evan, invited me to a lock-in with the youth group at his church. Up to this point in my life, I'd only been to church for a couple Christmases, maybe a funeral or two. I had no idea what to expect. But I told myself, what do I have to lose? Worst case scenario, the people are weird and I leave in the morning. So that Saturday, I decided to go. We stayed up all night, playing games and pulling pranks on the youth group leader, Dan. Sunday morning came, and everyone invited me to stay for service. I don't think I'd ever been to a regular church service before. Once again, I told myself, what do I have to lose? Worst case scenario, I sit in the back with my new friends and fall asleep while the dude talks. The thing I should have asked myself was, what do I have to gain? In that moment, little did I know that I was about to hear a message that would set me on a life-changing course. Pastor Doug Johnson preached a sermon with a message that I felt was meant just for me. You can't find true happiness outside of God. I immediately went from barely able to open my eyes to unable to blink. I was at maximum attention. I devoured every word the pastor said. In that moment, I wouldn't say that I fully believed, but life looked different. I finally had hope. For the next few months, I went to church every Sunday. Instead of going to the 10:30 a.m. service with all my friends sitting in the back, I went to the 8 a.m. service and sat in the front of the room. Everything Pastor Doug would say was new and exciting. It was all still about me and finding my happiness, though. Then, the next big event in my life happened. The high school summer mission trip. I couldn't believe such an awesome event could ever exist. We would travel somewhere halfway across the country with about a dozen other youth groups and live in a public school for a week. During the day, we would go out and work teams to do community service, and then at night, we would have a concert, hear a sermon, and stay up late playing games. The theme of the week was forgiveness, which I became all about. I was calling people all week to either forgive them for doing something to me or to ask others how I could earn their forgiveness for something I had selfishly done to them. Every day was better than the last, but all week, everyone kept telling me to prepare myself for Thursday. I was having an amazing time, but in the back of my mind, I was worried. What will happen on Thursday? I was going mad thinking about it. Finally, somebody told me, Thursday is known as Cry Night. Apparently, the speaker on Thursday is always powerful, and most of the people cry. Obviously, I was a strong young man, and nothing was going to make me cry. Oh, how naive I was. Thursday night came, and we all filed into the middle school gym, where all the sermons were given. But things were different this time. The lights were lower, the sound was turned down, and there was the biggest cross I'd ever seen right in the middle of the gym. Before the message, the songs were softer, with more emotion behind the singer's voice. As the speaker walked to the podium, all the youth group leaders began to hand out these little tiny old-fashioned nails. Then the speaker gave the most beautiful gospel presentation I have heard still to this day. All week, I loved this idea of forgiveness between humans, but I was actively avoiding God and His forgiveness. I had been my entire life. The speaker hit hard the message that we need to let go of our failures and sins and let Jesus forgive us. I was distraught. I had to let someone else take away my sins and transform me. This was against everything I learned in my do-it-yourself family. The speaker brought attention to the nail in all of our hands. He said that his portion was done, and if we were willing to give our sin to God and let Jesus forgive us, then we should get up, push our nail into the cross, and go celebrate with our friends at the party after. He also said that the gym would be open as long as it needed to, and that there would be people to pray with us. Quickly, I noticed most of the others getting up, pushing their nail in, walking out of the gym, but I remained. I couldn't do it. The pain was too much. I had to find a way to deserve forgiveness myself. I couldn't let anyone else do it for me. I sat on that hardwood gym floor for almost an hour, arguing with myself and crying. That's when my own selfishness became apparent. I spent all week and the past many months hearing about everything God had done for me because I can't do it myself. And all Christ wanted was to forgive me and transform my life. It was like a switch was flipped and a light was turned on. I stood up, thanked Jesus, and stuck my nail into that cross along with all it symbolized. As I turned around to leave, I noticed about a half a dozen of my closest friends from youth group and my leader sitting on the bleachers waiting. They had been there the entire time praying for me. In that moment, I experienced pure joy from the Lord. I realized chasing happiness was a mistake because it is fleeting. But this joy from God was a comfort that I never realized was missing in my life. For those of you out there that know this joy, you also know that it can produce many hearty tears. But I didn't care because my life had been changed, and I was surrounded by brothers and sisters who loved me. Obviously, the story doesn't end there, but one of the many beauties of God-sized stories is that they never truly end. They roll into new stories, and we get to live through them forever with God. I hope you enjoyed this portion of my story, and I have many more stories about how God has changed my life. But for today, I will end with Proverbs 3, 5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Thank you very much.